Hi, I'm Stephen Reich here at the pokepress studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Eric Summerer, who some of you have heard in one of actually several possible places. But he's here today to talk about his experience with the Pokemon trading card game. Now, just a little quick piece of background. Eric does a variety of things. He does the voice for audiobooks. He also runs something called the Dice Tower podcast, which is a sort of board and other types of games podcast. But he does have some experience with the Pokemon trading card game, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, Eric, where are you from originally, and how did you originally get introduced to the Pokemon trading card game?
I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and went to school in Syracuse. And while in college, I graduated in 2000, so this was sort of right at the peak of Generation 1 Pokemon. I was introduced to the card game by one of my buddies and started collecting cards, played with my wife after we left college. I got married right after college. Started playing with her. And so pretty much from the base set to the fossil set, all the way through the Neo set is when we were playing. And then just sort of fell off, started playing other games, and just recently have gotten back into it.
Yeah, that's the way a lot of folks started, although, you were in college when you got started, which is kind of interesting. What were your thoughts about the game back then?
Well, I thought it was a fun distraction. We were fans of the cartoon, of the series. Saw the first 3 movies in the theater. And just really enjoyed the flavor and the style of the whole thing. And so that's where I started, was with the series. And then getting to play the game was kind of cool, to have a one-on-one adventure and have the thrill of the chase is, I think, what a lot of people like about trading card games, and finding a card in a pack and trying to figure out how to integrate that into your deck and what else you needed to make that card work. Oh, this looks great. If only I had, another couple of basics to fit with this nice evolved form that I have now. And so we'd find something in a pack and then either hope to find cards that worked with it in other packs, or actually go hunting on eBay to try and find cards that worked well.
Yep. eBay has definitely been around since the late 90s, so it goes back. Now, did you ever have any experience with the video game side of it, or were you just not into video games at all back then, or how did that work out?
I played plenty of video games, but I didn't have a Game Boy, so I didn't have a portable system that would allow me to play Pokemon. I did years later, when I started recording audiobooks and commuting into New York on the train. To do that, I did get a DS Lite, and got one of the Pokemon games then. But that was the first experience with a video game. It was only sort of, I knew of it peripherally, but really my Pokemon experience was the card game and the TV series and the movies.
Gotcha. Now, did you have experience with any other collectible card games that weren't? Well, Pokemon sort of started kind of a rush there, but there was, in the early days, there was Magic, of course,
right.
Is sort of the big first one, and then Yu-Gi-Oh! Either of those or anything else from that area you played trading card game-wise?
I mean, friends would try to get me into Magic because, that was always Pokemon's too simple. You need to get into Magic here. And I just never really was interested in Magic. Pokemon had much more of a draw, and I think because I was a fan of the series, it was something that I could get behind these characters and know what a Gengar was and make that part of my deck. Magic just never had a draw. Interesting.
All right, well, you eventually, you dropped out for a while, and then you eventually came back, and that was sort of a convergence of a couple things in there. Can you sort of explain how that got started basically a few years ago, right?
Sure. Well, Pokemon led me to places that sold Pokemon cards, and they also sold other games. And so I started looking at Looney Labs products and other stuff that they sold in these stores, leading me to Catan, Transamerica, Carcassonne, and all of these hobby games that then led me to BoardGameGeek.com, if you're familiar with that. And that led me to podcasts that were just starting to take off, and there was one in particular called The Dice Tower that I became a fan of listening to. and that's run by Tom Vassell, a famous board game reviewer. And I wrote in one day, entering a contest to the Dice Tower, and said, hey, if you ever need production help, I had just recently left a radio job and was doing voiceovers full-time and not very actively. So I had some free time on my hands. I had equipment. I could do stuff for a podcast I was a fan of, and got more and more involved with this show because Tom said, free labor, yes, absolutely, I'm in. And eventually became the co-host when the then current co-host left Korea, which is where Tom and Sam Healy were recording this. He asked me to do a long-distance record, become the co-host for the podcast. And this was back in 2009. So I've been doing this for a while as now co-host of the Dice Tower podcast, which has a lot of publishers asking to have us review their games. So I'll very often, not as often as Mr. Vassell, but occasionally get review games in the mail, and they want to find out what we think and have us talk about it on the podcast. And at one point, the Pokemon Company contacted us and said, hey, are you interested in getting our latest wave of starter decks? And this was the beginning of the XY wave, I do believe. I'm not as together with what the sequence is of all of these as you are, but there were 3 starter decks, and they sent one of each and a couple of boosters, and said, try them out, let us know what you think, and review it on the show. And I introduced it to my then, I want to say he was 6 at the time, son, my elder son. And he enjoyed it, but it never really took off. We went and bought some more boosters, a couple of Elite Trainer boxes, and tried to sort of get this thing going, stoke the fires a little bit. And he enjoyed it, but it never really caught on. But I did enjoy getting my old decks out, my old cards, and trying my decks against his new decks. Enjoyed it, but it didn't quite take off. Skip ahead a few years, and then you've got the Pokemon Go resurgence, and my youngest son watching the television series. And I said, you know what, buddy? You know all these Pokemon from Pokemon Go, and you know them from the TV show. What if I showed you my old deck? And I brought out one of these old ones from 2000, 2001, and his eyes just bugged out. Oh my goodness, here's Pikachu, here's Raichu, here's all of these characters that I know from these other places. And then he said, I want my own deck. I want to play this game. And he has just jumped in with both feet into the game, and it's gotten his brother interested as well. So now all 3 of us are playing, and this past Christmas there was a lot of Pokemon card opening. And building of decks, and we got some of the championship decks to try those out, and it's really just been a huge resurgence in my house.
Well, it's great to see that you sort of rediscovered the game that way, both through one of your hobbies, running a podcast, and also through your kids there. And it sounds like you've really had a great opportunity there to sort of connect with them. And I think some of the maybe Pokemon fans who were a little younger when they started the game are going to be having that opportunity within the next few years as they start having kids. So that's something for them to look forward to as well, I suppose.
Absolutely. It's been great.
Now, of course, since you had that big gap, a lot kind of changed in between those times. What did you kind of notice when you came back to it that sort of changed over the years with the game?
Well, the biggest change is the existence of the EX Pokemon, which sort of took me by surprise. I mean, obviously, there's going to be power creep. From 2000 to now, there's been many years of releases and waves and all that stuff, and trying to keep fans interested during that entire time, there's going to be evolution, for lack of a better term. And I expected that. But the EX existence was really, at first I was just totally bowled over by the huge jump in power between a basic and an EX basic being able to just destroy me. And it used to, my understanding of the game was you build your decks around the basics and then the level 1s, maybe level 2s, and you have that pyramid structure that you're building up to. And the most you can maybe do if you're really lucky and you've got Charizard fully powered up is maybe 120 damage. And now I'm seeing these EX characters and Mega EX characters that can do so much more than that. And it took me a while to wrap my mind around how to deal with those and start to build decks around dealing with the EX characters. And at first I thought it was overpowered. I guess it certainly helped that I've gotten some cards that are EXs, and I've looked at some of the sets that are built. The updating set of the EX or XY evolutions that updates the classic cards. Which has been fun. They, raise a character a couple of hit points or give them some slightly stronger abilities, knowing that you're going to be dealing with some stronger EX characters out there. That's kind of cool. So I've actually just been doing one-to-one swaps when I get one of these characters. When I get a good card that I already had in a deck, I'll just swap them out. And that's been the biggest change. And also, it seems like the competitive decks, although I said I was never really into the competitive scene back when I was playing in 2000, I did read some strategy articles back then about how to build a really good streamlined deck. And I think the philosophy seems to be very different now, noticing that with some Pokemon abilities are so useful that having a Pokemon in your deck that you have no intention of ever attacking with, it doesn't fit the theme of your deck, is still in there because its ability is so good. Almost like it's another trainer card that you can bring out and have some sort of ability that syncs and synergizes with the rest of your deck. That I wasn't seeing back in 2000, but it's kind of neat to see now.
Yeah, they've certainly rebalanced things. I'll be honest, the hugest fan of the way EXs were implemented. The modern EXs started in the 5th generation. There was something similar in the 3rd. But I will say that, yes, there's definitely been some power creep, which is kind of inevitable in any game that goes on for that long without any sort of hard reset, which I guess they've been fortunate enough to avoid. Some games do end up having to do that at some point. But, the evolution set has definitely been bringing some of that stuff back. I do kind of hope that they do something like that in the future again in some capacity. So you had mentioned, of course, that playing the Pokemon TCG got you into hobby stores, which got you into sort of the more designer game thing that has sort of blossomed in the last 10 to 15 years. Has being in the Pokemon card game originally, has that sort of given you any sort of perspective or made you notice anything about some more modern board games or deck building games or things like that?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that playing the Pokemon game has certainly helped me with seeing things in an efficiency engine or from an efficiency perspective. Because if you think about it, a Pokemon deck is an efficiency engine. It's a race to see who can take out six prizes first, and it's sort of taught me as you try and build decks that work and test out decks and realize, that something isn't working right and, maybe you need to adjust the energy mix in a deck or put in different trainer cards or adjust to an opponent that you didn't expect. It sort of taught me how to look for those forms of efficiency and those synergies in other standalone games. You might have a deck of cards in a dudes on a map game where you're battling stuff and acquiring powers and knowing which cards mesh well together and allow you to be more efficient is a key skill in these games, or various tokens or powers or stuff to invest in an economic game that's going to make life easier for you. And that's a very useful skill in modern board gaming, finding those points to invest in early that are going to help you out later. So I certainly feel like that's a good skill. I have also been exposed to different economic models from a publishing standpoint that try to capture something similar to the TCG model without going the booster route and having to chase down those rares and ultra rares and all of that. The living card game model, which sends out chunks of cards as a set. So I know if I'm buying XYZ set, I'm getting all the cards in that set, and I can play with them however I want, but I'm not chasing anything blindly. And then there are other companies that have gone that same route, Dice Masters and the new Star Wars Destiny set that has blind boosters. That's still a model that works. But I sort of gravitate more toward the I know what I'm getting model these days. Although recently, in the last few months, my kids are pushing me back in that TCG direction.
Yeah, they'll do that. There is a certain appeal to sometimes not knowing exactly what you're going to get, but I also appreciate the desire to sort of have more of a sure thing there. That's always a balancing act, not only in, what games you're going to buy, but also in the design of a mechanical design of games is sort of balancing out those two things as well. Are there any particular board games or other types of hobby games you might recommend to someone who likes the Pokemon trading card game?
Ooh, boy. Well, I would not recommend, if you ever see in Goodwill or on eBay, there is a game called the Pokemon Master Trainer game. I don't recommend it. Don't play it. It doesn't make any sense. I bought that way back in 2000, and no, it's gone now. I don't know how much how much experience your listeners have with the modern hobby sphere, but Dominion is an excellent choice for deck building fans, for TCG fans. And there's plenty of expansions to play with there, and scratches that itch of building an efficient deck as you play through the game. Millennium Blades is one that I haven't played, but it emulates the chase of a TCG model. You actually spend certain phases of the game collecting booster packs, buying cards, tweaking your deck, and then you move on to a battle phase, which sort of emulates a tournament or a competition, and see who does a better job based on what they bought in the first part of the game. I haven't played it, but I've heard very good things about Millennium Blades.
Yeah, I haven't played it either. I was kind of actually hoping, though, it would come up. I do know some folks who have, and I think it's about as meta as a game gets, I guess.
Yes, a little bit, especially if you're coming in, with just an experience, say, playing Pokemon and then jumping into Millennium Blades. That would be an interesting experience. If you are a fan of more than just Pokemon, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic as well, there's a Munchkin CCG that is coming out that uses the CCG, TCG model, but also makes fun of it. It does for trading card games what the original Munchkin, the Steve Jackson Games product, does for role-playing games. So there's a lot of humor, a lot of inside jokes about characters and card combos from Yu-Gi-Oh!, from Pokemon, from Magic, and they really take a nice tongue-in-cheek look at the whole sphere. My favorite deck building game, I don't know if it's my favorite, probably the one that has gotten me most excited over the past year or so, though, is the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle game. This is from USAopoly. This is a cooperative deck building game that works its way through the Harry Potter license through all, they officially refer to them as games, game 1 through 7, but it's really book/movie 1 through 7. Working your way through the different stories, and you add more cards to the system. It starts out with a very basic deck building that are very similar to many other deck building games you may find out there. But you are helping each other out on somebody else's turn, or giving tokens on your turn to other players, and really working to tweak your deck to do specific things that may be something that your team needs. I found the game fascinating, and it works its way all the way through all 7 books and can be totally scaled back to the first book if you're starting with new players or just want to start over.
Yeah, that actually does sound pretty interesting, and that's a new thing, not to be confused with the old. There was a Harry Potter TCG that around the turn of the century that they tried to push in the big TCG craze there
And we tried it. We played maybe through the first wave, maybe second wave. There was the Quidditch expansion, and we got to there and decided, we can't really divide our attention between Pokemon and this, so we'll stick with the Pokemon.
Yeah, I never really tried it out, but I did kind of want to mention that just to kind of point out that those are separate things.
Yes, this came out just this past year. You can find it at Barnes & Noble, of all places. It's in their movie section. You'll find it there.
Well, I'm willing to bet there's a decent overlap between Pokemon fans and Harry Potter fans, so that might be something worth checking out, at least for a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you had mentioned earlier about the Dice Tower. There's a sort of a core podcast, and you have a number of other ones. You talked a little bit about the main one. Do you want to briefly describe a couple of the other ones in the network?
Sure. Well, I mean, you've got The Dice Tower, which is the flagship podcast. And several years back, we sort of teamed up with some other podcasts to form a network, the Dice Tower Network, which you can find at dicetowernetwork.com. And there's all sorts of interesting shows from different perspectives, all different areas of board and card gaming. A few that I particularly like are Flip the Table, which is a hilarious podcast where four guys play cheesy, weird, and obscure games, often from like the 1980s. They'll play a Transformers game or a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. You know, some of the stuff that we played as kids, but they approach it as adults and often to disastrous results, and then make fun of it. There's always a game show at the end. It's really a very entertaining program. And then on the total other side of the spectrum is a show called Ludology, which takes a very deep look at game design, game culture, and different ways of approaching gaming, often from a designing standpoint. And it's hosted by two very strong game designers, Jeff Engelstein and Mike Fitzgerald. And they, both have a bunch of games under their belt, certainly know their stuff, and they will interview designers. And they've interviewed pinball game designers. In fact, Mike Fitzgerald worked on the Pokemon card game. I totally forgot that. So if you're a Pokemon fan, that Ludology is one to look at. I don't know what era he worked in or if he's still working in that sphere, but he does have Pokemon credits under his belt. So that's Ludology. And lots of other variety shows and some in-depth programs that only do, one or two games in an episode, and others that just cover as many games as possible in any one episode. Really worth checking out, dicetowernetwork.com.
And speaking of Pokemon connections in the Dice Tower Network, actually, the Flip the Table podcast back in 2014, they did review that Pokemon board game you
Pokemon
mentioned.
Master Trainer. They did.
Wasn't necessarily the worst thing they saw, but it wasn't going to win their best of the year either. So,
no.
But that's how I got into that podcast, was through that episode, and I've been hooked ever since, and that sort of led me to the rest of the Dice Tower.
Yeah, I'm on one of those episodes. If you search far enough,
Saved by the Bell, if I remember correctly.
Saved by the Bell. That's it.
All right. Well, speaking of, like I said, the Dice Tower Network, you're also doing sort of a fundraiser to sort of increase sort of the scope and doing some special things. Why don't you talk about that? That's on Indiegogo, correct?
Yes, it is. The Dice Tower is listener and viewer supported. Not only is there the podcast, there's also a whole video series. If you go on YouTube and search for almost any game, there's a good chance that someone from the Dice Tower has reviewed it. But it's all... We don't have any advertising on the show, and we are all supported by our viewers, our audience. And so every year we do a fundraising campaign on, this year, Indiegogo, and you can find it either at Indiegogo, searching for the Dice Tower, or go to dicetower.com and you'll find a link there. And we've got some thank you gifts, some promos for various games, but the important thing is that we're beholden to our audience, and not necessarily to a publisher or to a game that we, maybe aren't as enthusiastic about, but we have to smile about because they're paying us. We'd much rather be beholden to the people who enjoy our content. And so that's why we do a fundraising campaign every year, and that's active till the end of the month on Indiegogo.
And I seem to remember hearing in a recent episode you're doing something later this month. Hopefully there's still some time for folks to listen in to that. Can you explain what that is?
If you're talking about the live gaming marathon?
Yep.
Tom and crew are going to be gaming for 30 hours, I believe. Now, that's not the same group going for 30 hours. They have some sort of rotation system. I was unable to join them this year. I got to go down last year for a 24-hour gaming marathon, which was a blast. I'm in Connecticut, and they're all the way down in the Miami area in Homestead, Florida. But it's going to be a good time. You can watch them do this live on YouTube. They'll be streaming the whole thing, taking questions, chatting with everybody, and trying to endure their way through 30 hours of gaming. And that's coming up Thursday the 12th of January 2017. And I know I'll be tuning in just to see how they're holding up. Maybe not right at the beginning, because they're going to be totally ready to go. Maybe later on, get to see how loopy they've gotten.
Yeah, I know the feeling after playing a long game or going to a long tournament. Definitely know that feeling.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eric.
You bet. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This has been Stephen Reich from the pokepress studios in Madison, Wisconsin, on the phone with Eric Summer of the Dice Tower Network, talking about his experience with the Pokemon trading card game.